conversation is going round. People talking about the colors come to town. Fresh as a summer breeze, she'll take you by surprise.
Good morning and welcome to another exciting episode of Fresh Waves here at Whistle FM. So happy to be back in the studio. I've waited till the end of the summer, but it doesn't feel like the end of the summer at all. A big shout out to Reese's Market and Bakery for the muffins in the studio this morning, and Jason for all your help behind the board. How you doing, Jay?
Good morning, Bren. I'm doing very well, and how are you?
I'm great, thank you.
Great to see you.
Oh, it's nice to see you too.
Yeah.
It's nice that it's such a warm and sunny day. And if anyone's listening to a podcast of this in January, know that summer does happen again. And it's really hot right now.
It is, yeah. So we got to enjoy it.
Nobody's naked in the studio, but I think everybody wishes they were. All right. So maybe they don't, but you know, it's radio, so we can get away with that kind of thing.
We sure can.
I look great on the radio.
You do.
So do you, Jay.
Oh, thank you.
Fabulous. Anyway, and thank you to Ivan Harris for all that he does behind the scenes here at Whistle FM and specifically for Fresh Waves. We have a great show today. We have joining us Sue Reynolds of Slingers. And Sue, coincidentally enough, is really good friends with Cheryl. And actually, she's Cheryl's writing mentor. And Cheryl was on the show a few weeks ago talking about writing and writing retreats and going to some far-off wonderful place like Casamismac in Costa Rica to do writing. So Sue joins us this morning. Sue, nice to have you in the station.
Good morning. It's great to be here. Thank you.
I know that you've done some stuff with the radio in the past, but it's nice to come back and reconnect.
Right, and it's been a long time, so it's great to be back.
Well, let's learn a little bit about you. You're an author. You're a writing therapist, I would say, and a therapist in general, but specifically for writing. And how did this all happen? I mean, did you wake up one morning as a little kid and say, I like writing and I'm going to be an author one day? Because some people do that.
That actually is very similar to how it happened in grade 2. I used to, when everybody else was, doing their math homework and so on, I'd scoot through it, finish early, and I'd be reading under my desk, right? Because I just loved chapter books. And one day I kind of, the neurons connected and I thought, oh my God, somebody has to create these. Somebody has to actually write these. That's what I'm going to do. So really and truly, it started when I was about 8.
Isn't that funny? Because when I was 8, I did the same thing, but I did it with children's books. And I thought, I always want to write children's books.
Wow.
And the only thing that held me back, I had great stories, but I couldn't draw worth a bean. So nothing's worse than drawing stick figures. Because, you look at a children's book and some of the beauty of it is the beautiful illustrations. And that was never me. Oh, well, there goes my career down the toilet. I might resurrect it now. Over 50, what can we do? Start a new career as a children's author. Whatever. Okay, so you decided that you were going to write.
Absolutely. And for the next 20 years, I would say, I wrote, mostly for exploration, for pleasure. I did, when I was in my early 20s, I thought, I'll write a Harlequin. So I did that. It was a practice book. But when I was...
We could say that about all Harlequins. We won't go there.
Yeah. When I was 28, I started writing the book that would be eventually published when I was 35. It was a young adult fantasy called Strandia.
Neat.
And when it was published that year, it won the Canadian Library Association's Young Adult Book of the Year. So
wow.
Yeah.
And how old were you at the time?
35.
Okay.
Yeah.
Isn't that neat?
Yeah, but I started it when I was 28. So, those projects often take years and years, right?
Yeah, life gets in the way. And, I've known a number of authors who write a book that I think's fantastic. And then 3 years later, they're still writing that same book that I thought was fantastic on my first read. So you're all perfectionists to a point.
Right. Yeah. And of course the publishing process takes a while too, right? If you're working with a traditional publisher. So I think I was accepted for publication by HarperCollins for that book when I was maybe 32, but it was 3 years before it got through the editing process, the publishing got into the lineup, went through the sales process, the promotion process, all of that, and ended up actually on this
whole big thing in itself, isn't it?
It is.
And it's changed a lot over the years. The publishing industry.
Yeah, we're in a whole different world right now, right? With digital publishing, with access to print on demand. I mean, somebody can write a book, get it up on CreateSpace and Amazon and, and sell it a copy at a time. You don't have to go through traditional publishing anymore. Although, I always tell people if they're writing a novel, a book of fiction, it's much better to try and go with a traditional publisher because they have the sales force, they have the distribution system. It's very hard to market a fictional book on your own with a lot of success.
Mm-hmm. We had a person who has their own business doing small run productions and sort of somewhere between self-publishing and really going to a real publisher. And interestingly enough, she was saying that now a lot of the big publishing houses are scouting the digital world.
It's true. Yep.
Again, just a strange turn of events, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, that the digital world does a lot of the research for them, right? If somebody is able to successfully market themselves as a fictional author, sorry, not a writer of fiction, not a fictional author, a writer of fiction, through that whole self-publishing world, then they've probably got the content and the cred and the following to do really well in traditional publishing.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's that old power of word of mouth advertising.
Sure.
I have a network of people at the cottage, a little group of us that every year we get together at the annual cottage barbecue, and all we talk about is what books we've read over the last year. And we share the titles, we share the authors, we send each other emails, and now we're all listening to talking books because when we're driving to the cottage, nothing kills a 2.5-hour drive better than a great book being read to you while you drive. I love it.
Is there somewhere we can subscribe to that list that you put together every year?
You know what? It is a fabulous list, and there are things on the list that I would never normally pick up. And it's amazing. The power of word of mouth is still so great. It's the 1 tells 2, tells 5, tells 10, Right. That's how it goes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting. Okay, so now you're a published author, but you did other things at school. You did psychology, and you've done other studies in your life, not just literature and writing.
That's a late in life thing, actually. I went back to school for psychology in my 40s, back to university.
Wow, good for you.
And I did that because, okay, it's a long story. I'll try and make it quick.
You don't have to.
So I wrote the first book. It had, as I said, some success. And then I also had a baby at the same time. My only child was born at the same time my book was published. So suddenly I had very little time to work on my writing.
Yeah, and, I would say.
Yeah. And that puts incredible pressure on you, right? Like if you're writing for fun, the way I did as a child and as a young adult, it doesn't matter. But when you've had a successful book published and you're trying to get your second book together and you've only got an hour and a half a day when you're awake and the baby's asleep, there was so much pressure on it. And I just kind of froze. I didn't know what to do. So I started studying writing more intensely, and I went and worked with Natalie Goldberg. Do you know her?
No.
Writing Down the Bones.
Mm.
She's a Zen Buddhist, and she applies the principles of writing meditation of Zen meditation to writing as a practice. So I went and studied with her a few times, and when I came back from New Mexico the last time, I thought, I really need a community in Ontario to do this with. And this was long before, the writing organizations were as prolific as they are now. So I began offering workshops in the writing practice method, and then through that connected with the writers community of Durham region, and, got very involved with them, started the writing community of York region, fostered the writing community of Simcoe County. It just kind of proliferated, and I'm getting off topic. So
you've got all these writing groups, you've got a baby, you're trying to write a book, and I imagine if it's just been published, you're trying to promote the book that you just had published.
Yeah, well, that promotion cycle is actually pretty quick. You've got kind of 3 months, and then again, as a fictional author, if you haven't done the work in 3 months, you have to do the work in 3 months that you're going to do to promote a book with a traditional publisher, because then they're on to their next lineup.
Thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, the promotion wasn't a huge thing. I continued to do that, in a desultory way for over the next couple of years. I'd go and do readings at libraries and with book clubs and so on. But yeah, the promotion wasn't the big thing. The big thing was, how was I going to get my next book written? So I started studying it. Oh, I know where I'm going. You asked me about how I got into teaching and so on. So that was the beginning of the workshops, and then I continued to take workshops. I'm probably the biggest writing workshop junkie you've ever met. We were talking, and then I discovered Pat Schneider. That was about, I think my last Natalie Goldberg workshop was in 1998, and I discovered Pat Schneider's first book called The Writer as an Artist shortly thereafter, and in 2002 I went and did the certification in the Amherst Writers and Artists method that she developed years and years ago, which I can talk about at length as well. So anyway, that's how I got into writing and teaching writing. I know. The first workshop I ever taught in the writing practice method, there was a man there. He was a friend of a friend. He was a lawyer from Toronto. I didn't know him at all. And, we did writing on the spot together to prompts, and then I asked for a volunteer to read, and he offered to read, and he stood up. He began to read. It was the simplest story about driving there that morning and about where he'd come from and how people in Scarborough, the women hung out in the kitchens and the men hung out in the garages and smoked. And he just burst into tears. He started crying in front of, the 30 people in the workshop, right? And I was like, oh boy, I'm not quite sure how to support him in this. But I realized at that moment that writing together is a very powerful tool. So, a psychological tool. Mm-hmm. And that's when I began getting interested in writing for therapeutic benefit. And eventually I went back to school for psychology. I made therapeutic writing my specialty. Wow. I have become, over, the years through my, BSc and my MA, a psychotherapist. And I use writing extensively in my practice with my clients.
Isn't that something? Well, we have to take our first little break. Jay, play some ads for us and pay some bills here at the station. And when we come back, we'll continue our discussion with Sue Reynolds. Stay tuned. You're listening to Fresh Waves.
Hey, I'm whistling. Would you like to whistle too? Whistle FM is looking for a few good volunteers. Come and join our team and learn a new skill. We're looking for producers, show hosts, and even people to help out around the station. Learn something new and meet new people. Email us at admin@whistleradio.com or drop by the station behind Stouffville Fine Furniture. We hope to see you soon.
Hey everyone, this is Lil J. Join me every Saturday night at 11 p.m. Eastern for The Block Party. A 2-hour journey of the best in the Canadian underground dance music scene, featuring tracks and DJ mixes from Canada's emerging artists, from the disco hits of the 70s to the latest dance floor fillers. No lineups or cover charges, it's your weekly free access to the beats that are packing dance floors in Canada and around the world. The Block Party, Saturday nights at 11 p.m. Eastern, right here on 102.9 Whistle FM and online at whistleradio.ca.
We're back on Fresh Waves. I'm your host, Bren Masson. We're speaking with Sue Reynolds of Ink Slingers about writing. We're going to be talking this morning about all kinds of different aspects of writing. One in particular is becoming a novelist. And we know that from a young age you wanted to be a writer, Sue. And there's a lot of people who've always had that thought. Then they wake up one morning and think, today's the day I'm going to start writing my book. I've written my own novel about 8 million times. Okay, 8,000,003. As I walk, when I'm walking my dogs or when I'm doing my Nordic pole walking and I'm by myself, the story starts to unfold. I can see the characters, the places. I've got everything all laid out. The ending's a little dicey, but actually the ending is actually okay. It's the middle part that's a little dicey. But, there's a lot of people like that, I think. The next great novelist is sitting on the subway right next to you in the morning on your way to work or something like that. So how did you actually make that a reality?
Oh, you're talking about writing my own novel?
Yeah.
I just...
You were on a mission to do that all along, like through school and high school and everything? Did you think, I'm going to be a writer?
Oh, yeah. It was, I'm going to be a writer. And, and as I say, lots of sort of practice writing, lots of short stories, and of course, I was also a phenomenal reader. I just gobbled books. And I have to say, for anybody who wants to write, I think that's one of the most valuable things you can do is just read widely. Mm-hmm. But the actual novel that I ended up, finishing and publishing, my husband and I were sitting with my younger sister at that point. And, he looked at my younger sister, whose name is, Sandy, and said, "Sand of Strandia." And we just started. Who would that character be? Where would they come from? What was going on in their lives? And originally we thought we would write it together, but they, lost interest very quickly. But I was really taken with the character, so I wrote the whole book. Yeah,
isn't that neat?
So that's how it's. But I'm a binge writer. I have a really crazy busy life, so I have to set aside, periods of time. So I would write on vacations. I would write on, weekend retreats. But I'm not one of those people who gets up every morning and goes to my desk and produces, a steady 3 pages a day. I should be, but I'm not. So.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a should be sort of thing. I think everybody works in different ways, don't they?
They do, but I have to say that most prolific novelists I know, that's the way they work. They have a very steady, that's the tortoise, right? Slow and steady.
Okay. I'll have to ask you something that's always been on my mind. I read these great books, whether it's Diana Gabaldon or even J.K. Rowling's. You read these stories that are long. J.K. Rowling said she wrote all the stories in her head before she divided them into books. Mm. So you could think if you put all those 5 books together, there's massive, massive amount of reading. And the characters are the same throughout the books. How do you leave those characters and go make dinner and become a regular person who's driving a kid to whatever activity or going out and socializing with your friends? I mean, as a reader, I'm socializing with my friends thinking, wow, I wonder what Jamie Fraser's doing today. Or I wonder what Claire's doing. Or I wonder what Harry's doing or Hermione. You get these characters in your head as a reader and you can't get rid of them. And when the book ends, I don't cry because it's a sad ending. I cry because what are they going to do? Don't leave me. I want to know what you're doing right till the very end.
Yeah.
I don't want this book to end. So as a writer, how do you leave those characters behind and live a life while you're writing?
I think most writers find it very difficult to leave characters they're attached to. I actually do a writing residential retreat every summer with the same group of writers. And this year, one of the writers was working on a book. It's a steampunk book. The characters are just they're very much like the Harry Potter characters you just talked about, right? They feel by the end of the book like you know them intimately. They're quirky. They're fun. And he said, I find myself getting depressed. I don't want to leave them. But the other thing you started to say was about, how do you become a normal person when you're writing? You're working with these characters every day and then you have to leave it and drive your kids around. And again, so there's a case for writing every day. Because if you do write every day, it's sort of like your brain is split. On the one hand, you're constantly kind of with them, right? You go back to them every day and, you don't drop it. They don't disappear. They're constantly kind of chattering over here in your head while you're living your real life. And then you return to them every morning. But if you leave those characters for a month or 2 or a year and you come back, you find them all sitting silently in a room with their arms crossed looking at you like, what? Like you left us and now you want to talk to us? I don't think so.
You have to get to know us all over again.
Exactly. And, one writer I was talking to, she'd just come into a class and everybody was going around and talking about, what it was they wanted to do. And she said her writing felt like a rusty tap, right? It was like, and I think that's one of the best descriptions I've ever heard of like trying to get back to your writing when you've been away from it for a while. Yeah.
It does sound like a really difficult task in this fast-paced day and age. Mm-hmm. And even in the movies now, I find a lot of movies or a lot of television shows, the character development isn't nearly what it used to be in older writings. People want little tidbits and they want it fast. commercials when they first started were 2 minutes or 1 minute. Then they went down to 30 seconds, then 15, now 10, and sometimes less than 5 when you're on a YouTube thing looking. It's got, this will end in 4, 3, 2, 1. You can cancel it now, and everyone does. So they've got 5 seconds to get their message across.
Right.
I've read books that have been published where the chapters are 1.5 pages or 2 pages. And then you're on to it's back to a different story, then on to the next story, then back to the different one. And it's weird. But it seems to be a sign of the times that people like their information quick and down and dirty, as opposed to a long, lengthy War and Peace.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt that this is a culture that's developed a shorter attention span. But, you can turn it around and say there's something fabulous to be learned from that. I think that's why there's so much emphasis now in when you're presenting your manuscript to a publisher on the hook, right? On the opening. And does it grab the reader right away? Because we are a culture, people will buy their books that way. They'll pick them up in the bookstore or look at the first page. And if there isn't something there that gets them into the story, it's like your YouTube commercial video. Or, Amazon online, you click on the icon and usually you can read the first few pages, right? So again, you've got to grab your reader right away.
Yeah, it's an interesting phenomenon because I can remember reading books that I've been thinking third chapter in. All right, someone's got to start happening soon. And then when it does, the first 3 chapters all of a sudden make all the sense and the book just takes off.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's walking along like a little bird and then all of a sudden the wings come out and wow, does it go.
Right.
But it was a struggle getting through the first couple of chapters.
And if you're a first-time novelist, the chances of you being published with that kind of book, with that very slow start, are quite slim.
Mm-hmm. Nowadays, I guess that would be the case.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, Jay, time for our next little break. And when we come back, we'll continue our topic about how to be the novelist. How to take it from sitting at the dock thinking of the story to actually writing it down. You're listening to Fresh Waves. I'm Bren, your host, and we'll be back right after this. Stay tuned.